There's really never been anyone in American history quite like Teddy Roosevelt. Let me give you a little bit of his biography. He was the greatest American celebrity of his day, easily the best known and most popular person in the country. Teddy Roosevelt had come from a wealthy New York family. He had gotten involved in politics, even though his family considered themselves to be above this. He was a state representative. He was the police commissioner of New York. And then he had a tragedy. On the same day, in unrelated incidents, both his mother and his young wife died. He kind of had a meltdown, and he moved out west. There you see him in that Western outfit, where he wrote a 4-volume history of the West and went on kind of a hunt to kill all the different animals of the West, including forcing some poor guy to drag him all over the West until he found a buffalo. The buffalo were near extinction at this point, so he could shoot and kill one. He returned kind of back to the world, back to the East, and became an undersecretary of the Navy under William McKinley, where he would plan wars that he would like to see happen. He was an American imperialist, and he believed very, very much that America should spread itself throughout the world, much like the European powers had. And as we talked about, when the Maine blows up in 1898, it will be Teddy Roosevelt who will be one of the primary architects, primary planners of the Spanish-American War. And he will resign his job as Undersecretary of the Navy to organize a volunteer military unit, the Rough Riders, and the media will declare him to be the great hero of the Spanish-American War. Whether that's true or not is a little bit debatable. But he will, at the end of the war, the biggest winner of the Spanish-American War is Teddy Roosevelt, because he becomes a superstar celebrity because of the media coverage of his exploits. McKinley, worried about re-election in 1900, will choose Teddy Roosevelt to be his running mate, under the assumption that people will vote for him because everybody loves Teddy, and that Teddy will be unimportant because he's the vice president. But all that changes, of course, in 1901 when William McKinley is assassinated by the anarchist Leon Gogosh, making Teddy Roosevelt the 42nd president of the United States. There's Gogosh. Gogosh was crazy, by the way. He like Guiteau, who killed Garfield. This is pretty much just a crazy person here. Teddy Roosevelt will become the youngest president ever, and he will scare the hell out of the Republican Party. Now, these are the people who made him the vice president. These are the people who put him in that position. But they had no intention of him becoming president. The man who ran William McKinley, the guy who raised all the corporate money, William Hanna, would say, "I told McKinley it was a mistake to nominate that wild man. Now look, that damned cowboy is president of the United States." They feared Teddy, and here's kind of how Teddy was perceived. He was he was the youngest man ever to be president, and he was a wild man. I mean, he was undeniably unlike anybody else who had ever been president, except for maybe Andrew Jackson. They feared they couldn't control Teddy. They feared that he would do what he wanted. In reality, he didn't really rebel that much against the Republican Party, at least in the beginning. And for the most part, he championed mild change. Like many wealthy, aristocratic types, he saw reform as a way to put off the need for real change. He decided to regulate, not destroy the trust. In fact, many of the trust he left alone completely, declaring them to be good trust, beneficial monopolies. He believed the government should investigate and publicize actions, but he didn't believe the government should actually stop them. So if your company was doing something unethical, he thought it was the government's job to let everybody know you were doing it, and then let the people decide if they wanted to keep that company around or not through business. In 1902, he does break up J.P. Morgan's Northern Security Railroad and 40 other trusts, and he earns the nickname the Trust Buster. Here he is fighting a train. I always like that picture. But he didn't really try to change the fundamental basis of our economy. And like I said, he left most of the monopolies alone. Many people have argued that Teddy really went after a trust he personally didn't like. Like if he knew the guy that ran it, and because he was from a rich family in New York, he knew all these people, he might go after them if he didn't like them, and he might leave them alone if he liked them. And so his reputation was probably a little bit overblown in terms of attacking monopolies. In 1902, when the United Mine Workers went on strike, the mines are shut down just as winter is coming on, which means there won't be any coal for heat. Roosevelt offers to arbitrate this. He's going to come in as a federal arbitrator and tell them what to do. The owners don't even show up to the meeting. The union comes, and the owners won't go to the White House. This incenses Roosevelt. He's personally offended. He can't believe these mine owners won't come talk to the president. And so he sends the U.S. Army out and says he'll just use the Army to reopen the mines. The owners cave when they realize that Teddy isn't playing around. And they give the miners a 10% pay raise and a 9-hour workday. But they refuse to recognize the union. That's important. So the miners win their immediate demands, but they don't get their long-term goal of actually having a union. In 1904, Roosevelt's going to run for re-election, and he points to the way he dealt with the miners and he says he gave them a square deal, meaning a fair deal, right? And he's going to run for re-election on the idea of a square deal. The idea here being that Teddy is fair. Teddy, he's a politician, he's the government and all, but he'll treat everybody fairly. And he wins easily in 1904. He crushes Parker and Davis. You notice the South is the only place that they can get any votes. Of course, the South still refusing to vote Republican because of the Civil War. Roosevelt strengthens the ICC with the Hepburn Railroad Regulation Act. That's the Interstate Commerce Commission, of course, in 1906. Remember, that was the first government regulatory agency, but it didn't have any power. Well, Teddy's actually going to give it some power, so it doesn't have to rely on courts to enforce its decisions. It can actually do some things on its own. Having been shocked and appalled by the rancid meat given to soldiers in the Spanish-American War, and also responding to the rash of patent medicines, finally, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, which remember is that book about the horrible conditions in the meatpacking plant, which apparently Teddy Roosevelt read. He is going to push through Congress the Pure Food and Drug Act, which means the federal government gets to inspect our food. You'll notice here's over-the-counter heroin that you could walk in and buy at a grocery store. You see some of these. You could buy cocaine. Cocaine toothache drops, there you see. And these were causing people to become addicts, and in many cases just flat out killing people. There was no regulation. There was no agency checking the safety of these. My favorite is the Revigator, I guess. This is an irradiated jar that you put your water in, and it irradiates your water, and so you drink the water. And it is true that it kills any infection you have, but of course it also kills you. And so in the short term, it would wipe out any bacterial infection you might have because you were drinking radiation. But of course, in the long term, it would kill you. Without any government agency to say what was legal and what wasn't legal, all these things were just simply being sold in your local drugstore. It's pretty amazing, really.